friends and neighbors.
Hi there, can people hear me? Can you hear me? Uh-oh. Ritu, can you hear me? Uh-oh. Carter, can you hear me? No?
I can hear you,
I
yes.
can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You can hear me. Just want to make sure. And we've got, let's see, 13 participants. Let's see who they are. So far, we've got 10 attendees. Great. So, we have Corey Kunz and Ellen Bear from Hudson Square Bid, Emily Goldstein, George. Can George Haikalis be elevated to a panelist since he is on the committee? Oh, great. Okay. And I see we have Jake McNally and Jennifer Young. Oh, hi, Jerry Gluck and Matthew Lorenz, too. Okay. Well, now let's see. Oh, hi there, Michael Levine. Let me just see.
Hello, everyone.
Good to see you. Hi there, Lois. See you, too. You can unmute yourself, I think. Let's see now. How many people do we have from Community Board 2? Do we have a quorum yet? We've got me, 1, 2. Maybe that's 6. Do we consider a quorum just from the committee or on Zoom? Do we consider other folks also as part of the quorum? Does anybody know?
It should only be committee members, both
Only
public and full board.
Okay, so just to our guests, we're just waiting to make sure that we have a quorum. Let's just see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4,
7.
We've got enough. Okay, so we can begin. So good evening to everybody. Welcome to the committee members. I am Shirley Secunda, the chair of Community Board 2's Traffic and Transportation Committee. So welcome to the Traffic and Transportation Committee. And before we go further, I would like to introduce you to our committee members. And I will do that by way of calling attendance. So first, Ritu Shatri, who's also, by the way, our vice chair.
Present.
Present. And Joe Gallagher. Joe, I see you. I guess you're muted, but I see you moving your lips very well. Okay, thanks, Joe. Janet Liff. Is Janet Liff here yet? I know she will be. And Ed Ma, is he here yet? No. Dan Miller, I see you. Just raise your hand. Okay, hi, Dan. Lois Rakoff, I saw her before, so I know you're here. Well, just, raise your hands as I call you so that our guests know who you are anyhow. And Anthony Wong, you can't raise your hand, but he's Charlie Brown tonight.
I am present.
I see you too, as Charlie Brown. And Adam Zeldin is not here yet. Janet Liff, there you are. Will you raise your hand just so that everybody can hear me? Oh, okay. Janet Liff, there she is, shaking her head. And let's see now. Our public members. So Joe Flayhaven, are you here? There you are, I see you. Okay. Joe's name is. And I do see George Haikalis. I saw George Haikalis has got a great hat, right? You just raise your hand, but I think everybody will know who you are from your hat. Okay, great. So welcome to everybody and welcome to our guests. And let me just, for any of you who have, of our guests who have not been, and I want to introduce you to Carter Booth. You can see his photo there, and that's the chair of our committee, and he helps us out.
Hi guys, I'm on another Zoom as well, so
Good.
get you guys in minutes.
Okay, so before I go any further, I'll just give you a few of the guidelines for those of you who don't know how our routine works. We have 2 items on the agenda tonight, and each item is heard completely separately. The first order of the day is for whoever is sponsoring the issue or talking to it will speak. Then the committee asks questions. Then we open it up to our guests, the attendees, and we ask them to both ask questions and to comment. And that's how that works. And by the way, Adam Zeldin has just come in too. So welcome, Adam, who is another member of our committee.
Thank you.
Okay, so once we go over the two items, we then go into executive session. And oh, no, it's not executive session anymore. Now we call it business session, but it's the same thing. And that is a time when only the committee speaks, but our guests are welcome to stay and hear what we say. Basically, we deliberate about the issues and decide what our, more or less, our positions are on them. And often that leads to a resolution. In fact, most times. That is not the end. The end, or I shouldn't say the end, maybe it's the beginning in a way, but the final decision on these issues is made at the full board meeting. And this month, the full board meeting is on Thursday, December 17th at 6:30 p.m. So just be aware of that session from the board's calendar, from CB2's calendar, or you can say how you can register for that, and then you will get connections for that. So that's basically the routine, a couple of guidelines. Please just don't speak out, yell out. If you have to speak, raise your hand. I think most of you are familiar with Zoom. If not, you can see that in the participants list, there is a raise hand button that you can press, and it will show if you want to speak, and either Ritu or I will be calling on you. And by the way, I should mention, again, point out Ritu Chatri and Joe Gallagher are my wingmen, and I really could not conduct this meeting without them. They're the guys that really do the back work, as well, by the way, as Carter, who we introduced to you before too, our chair, and they really helped me out in running the Zoom meeting and doing all the technical stuff I really don't know or pay attention to. And I think that's about it. Raise your hand, don't speak out. You have to speak to each other, put on mute for sure. Stay on mute until you need to talk. And that's really it, I guess. And there will be some folks speaking to the issues that I see. We have to put you, we have to elevate you to a panelist. So let me just tell you the first item of the evening, and that is a request. And this is actually the Hudson Square Connection. That's the Business Improvement District. And they are requesting that a CitiBike station be installed just south of Clarkson and Varick Street as an alternative to DOT's proposed King and Varick Streets location. Many of you probably are aware that last month in November, the DOT presented a list of suggested locations for new or extended CitiBike stations, and that King and Varick Street was one of them. And I think, you know, the bid will tell you themselves. But basically, I think they kind of weighed it, and because that's really right in their territory, they know what's going on. And I'm not going to say anymore. They'll tell you about it. So is it Jake who's talking? Okay. I introduce you to Jake McNally. Jake, raise your hand so everybody sees you. There you are. Okay, you're on.
Thank you, Shirley, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to try sharing my screen here, but it says it's disabled.
You getting it?
It's still out. There we go. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes. Everybody else, I can see it fine.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so good evening. I am Jake McNally, Director of Planning and Capital Projects for the Hudson Square bid. And as Shirley mentioned, I'm here to present our request for a new CitiBike station, which would be an alternative to one of the locations presented by DOT at last month's committee meeting, which we have some concerns about. First, to provide some context on bike activity in Hudson Square. Going into the pandemic, our daytime population was 70,000, which included 60,000 workers. Of course, things are a little quiet right now, but we do expect and hope for a robust return next year. In 2016, we actually did a survey of the neighborhood workforce, and that found that 7% of the workforce biked to work. So, we had thousands of people riding to work in Hudson Square even before the recent bike wave. And from CitiBike's station use data, we know that in March of this year, so pre-pandemic, our Hudson Square stations were up 20% year over year. And then during the pandemic, there's been a lot of reporting, I'm sure everyone's seen, about more and more people turning to bikes. And additionally, we have Google bringing thousands of new workers to the neighborhood over the next few years, and they have a higher than normal share of their workforce that bikes to work. So a significant and growing amount of bike activity. And to meet this moment, we are leading a number of efforts to make the neighborhood more bike friendly. Our Hudson Street redesign is currently in construction, and when finished, which will be as soon as the end of next year, there will be a new protected bike lane all the way from Canal to Houston Street. Through that project and our tree planting program, we are installing over 100 new city racks over the next year or so. And we've been coordinating with our owners and businesses to identify appropriate opportunities for new and expanded CitiBike stations throughout the neighborhood. This is a map showing all of the existing stations in Hudson Square, the planned stations that DOT presented to the committee last month, and the change that we are proposing today. Earlier this year, we had been advocating for the expansion of the station at Greenwich and Houston, which was, happy to say, actually implemented by DOT about 2 months ago. And we had also requested a new station at Greenwich and Spring, which is only a block from the new planned station at Spring and Hudson, which they presented last month and which we're in support of. But the reason that we're here today is to talk about the station planned for King and Varick. And as I'll explain on the next slide, we have safety concerns about the King Street location and are proposing an alternative location that's just 2 blocks further north on Varick. And as you can see here, would still address the gap in the network. This drawing from DOT reflects the recent DOT improvements between Clarkson and Houston along Varick Street. It includes a splitter island at Clarkson Street that separates the tunnel-bound turning cars from pedestrians crossing Varick, a number of bulb outs that provide additional queuing space and shorten the crossing distance on Varick, and a parking protected bike lane on the east side of the street. And I should say, yeah, I know these improvements are something that this committee really fought for and advocated for over the years. So everyone's really happy that this has been implemented. And again, the red dot here is the King Street location that DOT presented last month, and the green dot is our proposed alternative. So our major concerns with the King Street location have to do with the Houston and Varick intersection. This new station would become the ideal docking location for bikes that are coming to the neighborhood from the north via 7th Avenue. So by placing the station on King Street, it'll be drawing all those bikes down Varick past Houston Street. Not only does the bike lane terminate at Houston, but it dead ends into a very wide bulb out on the south side of the intersection. So we think by incentivizing that bikes continue down Varick, you're leading them into a very difficult maneuver where they are crossing a lane and merging back into heavy Varick Street traffic. We are also concerned about pedestrians standing in that large bulb out waiting to cross west across the street. Because of the angle at which bikes need to navigate around the bulb out, those bikes that do continue through a red light, which we all know happens now and then, could be coming from out of the pedestrians' field of view as the pedestrians go to cross the street, and could lead to collisions. We think that the floating parking lane up by Clarkson and Carmine Street is a much more appropriate siting. It would allow bikes to avoid riding with Varick Street traffic. It would bring more pedestrians to a block with a lot of retail that's trying to make it through this difficult economic situation. And its location near the Clarkson and Varick intersection would help strengthen and make more inviting the Northeast Gateway into the neighborhood. And here's a photo of the block that we're proposing. We are suggesting that the station go on the north end of the block where it's shaded yellow. This way the station would be protected by a bulb out on the north end. And the station would mainly front the Taco Bell cantina that's there. We know from talking to Taco Bell that one of their top streetscape preferences is bike parking. And it's also a fairly wide space between the curb and the outside of the parking lane, totaling about 20 feet. So we think this should allow enough space between the curb and parked city bikes for emergency vehicles to access it. And there are already some precedents for city bike stations sited in floating parking lanes. And we know that DOT has said that they're trying to adjust stations for different types of needs. And we think our location is a great opportunity to pilot another one of these. So that is our proposal, and we're hoping to gain the committee's support. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, so committee members, who might like to speak? Anybody have any questions?
I have a question that's
Okay.
sort of related. I mean, this seems all very well thought out. Why does the 7th Avenue bike lane, I mean, you obviously know your neighbor very well. Why does it dead end into a bulb out? Has there been any discussion of, it's a little, yeah, why does it dead end and not continue south?
We were actually, I have to say, Janet, we were somewhat surprised by that ourselves. Varick Street is such a complicated street. And even I want to refer back for a second to the Hudson Square West Village Transportation Study, where even they didn't conclude how you sort of apportion the space, the street space in Varick Street. We're certainly open to seeing the bike lane continue south. We need to look, though, at sort of the loading and unloading needs. And until that happens, and that could take a while before that happens, we think that this Clarkson Street intersection is sort of already completed. And so this would really finish it off. I should say it's also right across the street from the Dappolito Center. So we think it, as Jake said, it really creates an entrance there. But we're open to discussions about looking at the use of bikes going further south.
Right. I would just like to comment, and I'm not sure if this exactly answers the question because it really doesn't give a solid answer, but I do remember that DOT originally was going to have that bulb out on the west side of the street. And then they realized, and they came to us about this, and they said that that would interfere with turns onto there. And so they switched it to the east side.
It actually, Shirley, your recollection is correct. It actually, in spite of the fact that both the community board and the bid thought it should be on the east side of the street, they put it on the west side of the street originally, and it didn't work.
Right, exactly. that was why it ended up being on the east side. So
Right.
I don't know if that's the final answer, but that was why the DOT rationale. I see that.
I mean, sort of one of the good things about these bulb outs is that you can, they're not carved in stone, so to speak. They're painted, and so you can sort of live with them a little bit and see how they work. So we're living with this one.
Exactly. Oh, I see Dan Millard.
Yeah, hi. I just want to applaud the safety measures for pedestrians, Ellen, because this whole area is just so much safer to walk around, even a little bit north of it and south of it. And somebody who uses that corridor often, I think the location of this bike area is really smart. I actually thought you might actually have it on the side of the Dappolito Center, but listening to it does make a lot of sense. And given that we're getting a lot more bike traffic, it does make sense to extend it down 7th Avenue, but someone who takes this route and is forced to go on the sidewalk because of the delivery trucks, I know, Janet, close your ears, but I do have to take the sidewalk, and it's not it's very wide sidewalks there south of Houston. And there's not a lot of pedestrian traffic, especially now. It would be really terrific if we can extend that down to Canal Street. So it's more of a.
I think we really have to look at our bike network as bicycle use increases and increases and increases. I think we really do have to start taking a closer look at it in Hudson Square specifically. But thank you for the compliment, Dan.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you can cross the street now. you couldn't before.
That's great.
Which is amazing, right? Anybody else on the committee have any questions? Okay, so let's see about our attendees. If any, oh, we have a couple. Okay, Samir Lavinga. Can you give your comment? Samir? I noticed he has his hand raised. Do you hear me, Samir? Okay, there you are. Okay, Samir, do you have some comment?
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I walk by this area all the time, especially during like the heavy traffic on rush hour, and like you see cars kind of like drive through those bulb outs all the time. So I'm a huge fan of putting the CitiBike station in that floating parking lane, because it'll, someone who rides a CitiBike from time to time, it makes me feel a lot safer to have like a heavy object between me and the moving vehicles, especially during rush hour when people get a little bit more aggressive. So I'm fully in support of this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, and Darlene Lutz. Darlene, are you there? There you are, with a nice.
I'm here. Good evening, everybody.
Yep.
You're talking about my hood. I have an issue with, hello, Dan Miller, city bikes and bikes on the sidewalks on Varick Street. Last year, a bike came up behind me, brushed me, I went down, and I broke a wrist.
Yikes.
You know, we've done a survey just in front of my building, how many bikes use our sidewalk, which is to the tune of probably 10, 15 an hour. It's really gotten bad since the electric bikes are now on the streets. So yeah, we have a lane of bike traffic along Varick. Not that I think that putting more bikes is going to make that any better. The issue with city bikes, because we already have at Canal and Varick Street, we have the enormous valet parked city bike stand. You know, that hundreds of bikes come in and out of there a day, and, you know, lesser now because of COVID, but I'm sure that'll be fine in 2 weeks, as they're saying. But this has brought, what I find about all city bikes stands is that I've gone and looked at how the information is, and they don't say, stay off the sidewalks. You can be fined $250. That information is nowhere, and it's bedlam down here with the bikes. So before bringing more in, I would like to see some more enforcement. And if CitiBike wants to keep expanding, why don't they do their own, how about some enforcement from them? This is a big area for a lot of tourism. Tourists take them out. They don't know that they're supposed to ride. So before, installing anything more, how about just getting what is already there to work?
Okay, thanks, Darlene.
Thank you.
Anybody else, any of our guests, any of the committee? I guess that is it.
I actually have my hand up, Shirley. Just wanted to mention that's really the same point that Darlene and I are raising, and that it's not safe to go south of Houston on Varick. So you have no choice, especially with the heavy trucks coming down. So it is actually very much a concern. Unless there are signs pointed that you have to go east before you can go south again, which there are not. Or west to go south.
Mine would be cheaper.
Okay. So anybody else? Because it's going to be going, gone.
There's Stephen Graham, Shirley.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Ruthie.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, Stephen, hi.
Hi. I just want to make a quick comment that I agree with what Daniel Miller said. I ride that stretch on occasion on a bike, and it's quite terrifying when the bike lane disappears. I don't normally ride on the sidewalk because it's not legal or polite, but it is quite scary to not do that. And who was it? Darlene, you mentioned that CitiBike should do more communication, which I also agree with. I've been doing CitiBike almost since inception, so I can't remember the last time I read carefully the label on the bike, but I do remember the first time I did it, it says clearly on the handlebars of each bike that riding on the sidewalk is illegal.
So there is actual signage?
Yeah, it's on each bike, you know, or it was. I have to say I haven't checked lately, but I think it's a good point to agitate for them to communicate better.
On each city bike, okay.
I believe so.
That says
And then
stay
I would like,
outside.
Shirley, I would just like to insert something over here with respect
Sure,
to,
you do.
which is to differentiate things like CitiBike. And Darlene, I take your point on that, versus are we seeing more bike traffic on sidewalks from delivery people?
Okay. Well, that's to be talked about another day. I think we have to get out of here, by the way, in case anybody doesn't know, before 6:30. So if nobody else has anything to say, I think we're going to move on. And going. Okay. So next on the agenda is Canal Street. And this is a presentation by a representative from Transportation Alternatives. This is a presentation we've really been meaning to have for a while, and somehow something else always comes up. So we're glad you're here tonight, guys. And let's see now, it's Adrian Mack, is that your name? Who will be giving the presentation? I do believe.
Hi.
Oh, there you are, Adrian. Great. Does anybody else? I know that Samir Lavindya was helping you out. Will he be part of the presentation? Do we need to elevate?
I think I'm the only one that's gonna be presenting.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so.
They've both been elevated, Shirley, just in case.
Oh, okay, great, Ritu. I told you my anchor people there. Right, wing people. Thank you, Ritu. Okay, so you're on, Adrian.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
So I'm here to talk about Canal Street. A version of this presentation was given at Community Board 1 in March. And we had hoped to get here to Community Board 2 a little sooner, but then a worldwide pandemic happened. So here we are. Margaret Chin, who's the council member who represents most of Canal Street, wrote an op-ed in the Tribeca Trib at the end of last year, talking about how the enormous amount of traffic on Canal Street is a public health crisis, which causes air pollution and car crashes, and that in the era of Vision Zero, this is a crisis for the city and for downtown that really should not exist. So what is Canal Street? Canal Street is basically a 7-lane highway in the middle of some of the most pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods in America. We have Chinatown, Little Italy, Soho, Civic Center, Tribeca, and Hudson Square. And in the middle, you've got 7 highway-sized lanes of traffic. And in order to really get between these neighborhoods, you have to transit Canal Street. And I know this very well because, excuse me, I'm a resident of Battery Park City. I've lived there for 7 years. And before COVID happened, I worked in Hudson Square. And my optometrist is near Canal Street. So I'm in this area all the time. And what you have are very narrow sidewalks, lots and lots of pedestrians, lots of car and truck traffic. And it's really not a good situation for people who are, excuse me, who are trying to get between these neighborhoods. And the community really wants to fix Canal Street. Margaret Chin, as I mentioned, published an op-ed in September 2019. Over 1,000 people have signed our petition at transalt.org/fixcanal. In March, Community Board 1 passed a resolution in support of fixed canal. And if you speak to pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers who use Canal Street, they'll all tell you that it's a safety hazard. And really, you know, safety is what is really important, I think, as we, you know, live in the city and as we are just trying to go about our daily lives, we really are risking our lives just crossing this highway. What are the problems on Canal Street? So one of the main problems is that pedestrians don't have enough space. Something you'll see is that at peak hours, there are 3 times as many pedestrians as there are vehicles, but vehicles get 90% of the space on Canal Street. If you think about the space as it's allocated from, you know, the buildings on the north side to the south side, 90% of that space is given to vehicles, but there's 3 times as many pedestrians. The crossing the street is really difficult. As you see in these pictures, the crosswalks are constantly blocked. The intersections are full of cars. There's a lot of honking. There's a lot of bullying of pedestrians as their you know, vehicles enter the crosswalks when they're not supposed to be there. The traffic enforcement is pretty ineffective. You have traffic agents that are there, but oftentimes ignored by all of the traffic. And so I've spoken and heard stories of senior citizens who live in the neighborhood who they would rather go into Canal Street subway station and cross underneath rather than trying to cross at street level because they feel that it's so dangerous. And in the statistics, there's injuries and deaths as well. Between 2016 and 2019, there were almost 2 crashes per day on this 1 mile segment between the Manhattan Bridge and Hudson Street. And here's some statistics about serious injuries and traffic deaths as well. So you can see that there's been deaths and a lot of serious injuries as well. There's also problems for other users of the street. So businesses have a hard time getting deliveries and because there's no place for them to load their and unload their goods. So a lot of times they double park, which leads to traffic backups into the intersections. There's not that much space for street vendors. So you have street vendors on the narrow sidewalks, which creates bottlenecks for people trying to walk. And there's also no safe route for cyclists to travel across town. So what are some of the possibilities that can make Canal Street better? So for pedestrian safety, here are some of the things that have worked other places in the city. So wider sidewalks, including painted sidewalk extensions. We've seen that used all over the city very successfully. Neck downs, which we just saw in the most recent presentation. So you guys are familiar with those. We like to see things like leading pedestrian intervals. So pedestrians getting a walk signal before cars so that they have an opportunity to be out in the intersection and seen by vehicles rather than having to compete and race into the intersection. And also vehicular left turn bans. Left turns were 3 times as deadly or likely to yield a serious injury compared to right turns. And so given the amount of pedestrian traffic on Canal Street, this seems like something that might be appropriate. And then as far as the other street users, we could have curbside reform, increase commercial loading zones, have managed curb regulations for commercial vehicle deliveries, designated space for street vendors, potentially in the sidewalk extensions, as well as protected bicycle lanes along the corridor. So they don't necessarily have to be on Canal Street, but a way for us to connect together the Manhattan Bridge to the Hudson River Greenway. And a couple of recent and future developments. So 2 days ago, two-way tolling on the Verrazano Bridge just started. So that's really exciting because a lot of truck traffic and vehicle traffic engages in toll shopping. So rather than people taking the eastbound on the Verrazano and then westbound on the Manhattan Bridge and not paying any tolls, now they have to pay a toll on the eastbound. So that's going to create less traffic on Canal Street, which gives us an opportunity to reimagine the use of the street. And then congestion pricing, which we don't know when it's happening, but it was supposed to happen in January 2021, but there's been some issues with the Federal Highway Administration. So, but that's also going to lead to tolls on the Manhattan Bridge. And so, that'll reduce the traffic on the Canal Street as well. And so if we don't act, here are some of the tragedies that have happened, recently on Canal Street. Less so because of the pandemic, but before the pandemic. And, you can easily see us returning to this kind of situation, once things return to normal. And there's a lot of other costs around quality of life, public health, air quality, street vendors, and just like pedestrian safety in general. So, Margaret Chin has asked the city to put pedestrians first and improve safety. And so that's what we're asking Community Board 2 to do, is to pass a resolution in support of fixing Canal Street and making it safe for all the users. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. And first, we will go to the committee. And committee, do you have questions? I know I have questions. But let's see who else is wanting to ask questions.
Can we get an emailed copy of that presentation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great. Yeah, if you could just email it to me, then I'll distribute it to the committee.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Okay, oh, hands raised now. Okay, first, Michael, I'm going to first go to Janet because she's a member of the committee, and then we will go to full board members as well. So Janet, you have a question. Janet, you have
just one question. You mentioned that the lanes are highway widths. I couldn't see the presentation that closely. So what are the widths of the travel lanes?
I mean, I don't know the actual.
Oh, okay, so you don't know.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I mean, as you experience it, the lanes are quite wide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and what wide lanes mean traffic moving faster, as we know. Okay, no comments. Michael, go ahead. I don't see anyone else on the committee having questions.
Hi, thank you, Shirley. Thank you for the presentation. I have a quick question. You mentioned widening sidewalks. Would this reduce the number of vehicular lanes? And is the Department of Transportation open to the idea of reducing the number of vehicular lanes? How much could we widen the sidewalks to make them more pedestrian friendly? And again, would DOT accept reducing the number of vehicular lanes?
I think it's something that they're open to. I think they haven't decided either way. With the two-way tolling on the Verrazano and the congestion pricing, I think that makes DOT much more open to the idea of reducing the number of lanes, just because there's going to be less volume of cars. So I think it's something that they, they need to do studies and all of their engineering work. So, they're going to do that. So they're going to make a decision and a determination on that. But I think they want to hear from the community that, pedestrians are important. And so if they have that input from the community and the community boards, I think they're going to be more likely to, entertain that.
Okay, thank you. And I see Dan Miller has his hand raised.
Yeah, this is a frequent thoroughfare for me. And I think you nailed it, Michael. I think that a study needs to happen. And that's right now, we don't have the current traffic patterns. So over time, we're going to see how much traffic actually goes west. The issue, though, is there's a lot of traffic going east to get over the bridge, and then also cross over to get to the Williamsburg and the Manhattan Bridge. So I don't know if that traffic's going to be mitigated at all, because that's not going to be affected by the Verrazano Bridge. But what's for certain is that we actually have to see how many trucks and how much less traffic we have, and to reach this point, see how much space we can take away from vehicles and give back to cycles and to pedestrians. And it isn't safe at all.
I think, if I could speak to that, I think there's two things that I mentioned in this presentation. One is that left turn bans can help with throughput, and the other is commercial loading, which is, prevents double parking. I think those are things that you can do that improve the throughput, as well as, you could take away a lane potentially just by making, not having double parking. Because when people are double parking, they're essentially taking up a lane. So I think those kind of changes, which DOT can do without any capital expenditure, are things that, would be helpful.
Okay, anyone else on the committee?
Just so that everyone's clear, the eastbound traffic is actually CB1. The north side of the street is CB2. It's cut right there.
Okay, anyone else on the committee? Because I have several questions.
Yes, I'd like to say something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, who is that? Oh, George. Hi. Okay.
George. Okay.
Yes, we hear you. I think.
We desperately need a comprehensive street use plan for the Manhattan Central Business District, which would be including a congestion pricing element, but that pricing should also be directed toward greatly enhancing public transit, and also the space that's then released by having the dial turned down should be creatively used for pedestrian space. This is like 3 or 4 pieces. We can't just do one thing at a time, helter skelter. This is, the world's greatest city, or at least we think it is. We have universities here in our community board that have studied all this stuff. Can't we go beyond just tiddling around with things? Let's get a really full-scale, comprehensive street use plan that includes congestion pricing, enhanced transit service.
George, I think, do you have a question, George? Right now, the committee's asking questions. We can discuss about a comprehensive plan, which was done like, 20 years ago with cats and never went anyplace, by the way. But you have a question.
Why don't we have a comprehensive plan?
Oh, okay. Now, when you talk about a comprehensive plan, and maybe Adrian, you can't answer this, do you mean Canal Street and its environs? The whole neighborhoods around Canal Street, George?
I think Canal Street is a trunk line that connects Long Island and New Jersey. It needs a much bigger view of what's going on. And we're just victimized by everyone else. And as long as we just let everyone roll by, that's fine. I think we can do better because there are agencies. I'm an alumnus of the Tri-State Regional Planning Commission. Tri-State Campaign certainly knows all about this stuff. I think they can, and as does our beloved councilwoman, who I've discussed with this many times. I think we need to really stiffen up and not just deal with a little bit here and a little bit there. Let's put the pieces together. They're interrelated. I'll end my rant.
Adrian, can you address that question? I mean, did TA take a more comprehensive look with Canal Street?
So TA didn't, but if you look back in history, there have been comprehensive plans about Canal Street in like 2000, 2010, and nothing has happened for the past 20, maybe longer. I mean, I'm not old enough, so at least 20 years. There's been plans made for 20 years. So I think it's more a matter of getting the political will and the enough community support such that DOT feels like this is something that we really need to do. So.
Okay, anybody else on the committee, on board two, have a question? Because I have a couple. Okay, so my first question, which Janet asked already, was the size of each lane. And you don't know that. Could you get those dimensions to me?
Someone put in the chat that
It's 10 feet wide.
10 feet wide.
Are all the lanes 10 feet wide?
10 feet wide with 6 lanes, according to Google Earth.
Well, you said 7 lanes. This is one of the other things. Is it 10 feet wide? Each lane is 10 feet wide? Is that correct?
I mean, I don't know.
I'm asking for a very specific reason, because some of your reports said they were as wide as 13 feet and 10 feet. So I'd like to get the actual width, because maybe that's one of the things we'd be asking for, is to narrow the lanes. If you get down to 10 feet, you can't go narrower than that, not if you're accommodating trucks. But if there are indeed 13-foot lanes, so that's why I'm asking if you could get those figures to us as soon as possible. Is that possible?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can try to find out.
You know what?
I think it varies along the, the length of the road, because basically it's not the same width all the way through.
Okay. So, you can send that to Janet Liff. I know that you've been in touch with her, and she can get it to the rest of us.
Okay.
Shirley, I just looked at the streets centerline data set that's published on New York City Open Data. It looks like it varies from 60. There's sections that are 62, there are sections that are 60, and there are sections that are 68.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So if you can just go, say, from north to south or south to north, whatever, across Canal Street, what the width of the lanes are, that would be really appreciated, because maybe we can work on some kind of recommendation right there. Okay, so you said 7 lanes. Now, how many actual moving lanes?
I think it's up to 3 moving lanes in each direction.
3 moving lanes in each direction? So it's not parking.
I think in some parts, I don't know off the top of my head, some parts it's like,
okay,
sometimes it's
again,
parking.
That's kind of a helpful thing, because I looked at the plan, and it seemed to me, and as Ritu just said, that it was a total of 6. So first, and there were 2 moving lanes that I could see on each side. Maybe that varies from place to place. But again, that would be of help. I mean, if we're going to talk to DOT, we want to talk about actual existing conditions. And the actual existing conditions, from what I can see, and I may be wrong, is not 7 moving lanes. So if you could get that to me too, can you?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, so you'll get information on moving lanes, and then which might be used for storage, right? Lanes and storage. I'm just writing this down so I know to get it from you as soon as possible. Okay, next. I asked about the car storage. And were there any other comments from elected officials besides Councilmember Chin?
That's all I'm aware of.
For instance, but the borough president, who obviously should have an interest in this particular issue. You don't know.
I don't know if the borough president has weighed in.
Okay, if you get that information also, okay.
Okay.
Get information on Brewer comments. Okay, and let's see. I think I have one more. Okay. So, do you have any figures on increased bike use on Canal Street, or I would say streets leading to Canal? Because you were talking about possibly the idea of a bike lane.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there are figures on Canal Street specifically. I mean, I think we've definitely seen, in the course of the pandemic, bike use has been up citywide,
Sure.
and people have been using, the bridge. I think there's probably bridge counters. I don't know the latest on that, but I do know that bike usage, city bike usage is at all-time highs. And so, I would assume that that would apply as well to downtown.
Okay, I just saw something in chat that said that DOT provides statistics on Manhattan Bridge crossing. So I wonder if maybe you can get something there. Manhattan Bridge crossings on bikes, right? No crossings on bikes. And I think that's all my questions. Now, the committee, do you have any more questions, or board members that are our guests? Okay, so let's see what our attendees are asking. Actually, I don't see anybody asking a question or doing a comment. Okay, Ritu, are there any interesting comments in chat?
People have been talking about the width of Canal Street, as I mentioned.
Yeah, yes, we want to. Yeah.
And someone mentioned here that trucks may need 11 to 13 feet.
Well, that's interesting. That's true, I guess. Sure.
That was from Dimitri Katumbas. Others, Andrea Peterson is advocating for wider sidewalks and bike lanes. And Darlene mentioned that it's only 6 lanes on the west end at Washington and Varick.
So it's only 6 lanes on the west end.
Jason Gers said that
Washington and, at Washington and Varick, or is it between?
I think it's West Side Highway, maybe.
Or West Side Highway, sorry, yes, you're right.
So it's the West Street, between West Street and Washington Street?
West and Varick.
West Street and Varick, okay. Oh, interesting. So it's much narrower there. Anything else?
And Jason Gers commented that statistics on the Manhattan Bridge crossings, the trend has been overall 30 to 50% versus last year.
Interesting. So versus 2019 of bike traffic on Manhattan Bridge, that may be something we would want to factor in. Okay. And
so I can give you guys of Canal Street. At West Broadway, it's 64 feet to the west. Canal Street going east from there is 70 feet pretty consistently through Broadway. There's a neck down to 63 feet. And then after Broadway east is 60 feet wide.
This is from curb to curb, Carter?
Yes, those are the Manhattan Borough President's street width and sidewalk width maps.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, so at Broadway it's 64 feet. I missed the next one.
Yeah, so it's 60 feet. So between Lafayette and Broadway, it's 60 feet. There's a slight neck down at Broadway. And then it goes to, hold on, sorry. And then it goes to 70 feet.
Where's that?
And that's west of Broadway.
A West Broadway is 70 feet.
And a west of Broadway.
A west of Broadway is 70 feet, yeah.
Canal between Broadway and West Broadway is 70, and then it goes down to 63 feet. I can send these to you.
Oh, okay, great.
To see, but it definitely looks like you got some movement. It's almost a lane of traffic there, but
I'm sorry?
It's almost a lane of traffic, those different widths. It's 10 feet.
Oh, sure, yeah, the difference is of almost 10 feet.
It's
And that
interesting.
would be something that a study could really look into and try to determine, where more can either be taken away or added or whatever. And I see that a bicyclist is talking about the danger of bicycling down Canal Street. And somebody said that most traffic is through traffic. Adrian, would you want to comment on that? Did you say that most of the traffic there, I guess it is, it's to the bridge, or right now it's to the tunnel. Well, maybe not anymore now that we've got the Verrazano 2 ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the traffic is through traffic. It's Manhattan Bridge to Holland Tunnel. And, hopefully some of that will be reduced by the Verrazano 2-way tolling. And, congestion pricing will also have a huge impact when and if that finally gets implemented.
So Richa, do you see anything else on that chat? Because I think that's about what I saw.
That's it.
That is it, right, okay. So then, anybody else? Any other comments? Yeah.
One of the things we talked about a long time ago, Shirley,
yes,
is there are big problems with the traffic going east and westbound, going north and south when they have to cross the other lane of traffic. And there is a huge difficulties in figuring out how to route. So for example, eastbound traffic coming out of the Holland Tunnel, going onto Canal Street, how do they go north in a somewhat remotely efficient fashion? In the same way, going west from the bridge, and there's no good way to do that without those left-hand turning lanes. So there's pretty much those 2 turning lanes when you're heading east, which go into Community Board 2, which are West Broadway and Center Street are the 2 main ones. And that causes some backups at different times, particularly at Center Street. It really creates a backup during rush hours, which prevents the even flow. And then you have that kind of curve as it over by Mulberry Street in that area. There's weird traffic pattern with a feeding in lane on the south side. But really figuring out that traffic pattern, how to move people around in a way that made sense would really go a long way to calming everything.
right. So it obviously needs a kind of intensive study, I would think. And unfortunately, there have been studies before. I was privy to the Canal Area Transportation Study. I think that may have gone back to 1999 or 2000, called CATS. And tremendous amount of money spent on consultants who really didn't come out with very much of anything as a solution. So it's something I guess we should discuss in business session as to how we want to frame a request for a study, I would think. So anybody else? Well, I guess that's it then. And we're going to move right into business session. Everybody is very welcome to stay and listen to what we have to say. But right now, it's only the committee that's speaking. So that's it. So committee, we'll go right back to our first item, which is the request for an alternative CitiBike station. I looked at the map, and actually it's probably, if it's a block difference, it's a lot. Because I think the request they have is just south of Clarkson and Varick, and the King and Varick is north. So it's a really short distance, but it obviously, to me, I shouldn't say it because I shouldn't influence people, but whatever the case, it seems that it's the Houston Street cutoff that makes all the difference. So committee, please, let's have your input on this. Anybody? Janet.
And
Okay.
I just quickly, and I think maybe people agree, I think it's that they made a very clear, persuasive argument, and I would support voting in favor of it.
Okay, anybody else have any comments on it? Right, yeah, well, and I would say I do rely on the Hudson Square connection because they're right there, so they see what's going on. And also, incidentally, the discussion of the possible bike lane down to Canal Street is not eliminated by this. This is just something that can be done right now, and I think we should ask it to be done right now, if all of you agree. And that in the meantime, I think we had put in a request to extend the bike lane to Canal Street on Varick, and that can be studied, and hopefully some action can be taken on that network. But so is everybody in agreement? Are we getting unanimous? Say aye, aye, aye. Okay, can you raise your hands? Okay, Adam, how about you? George, Joe, okay, swell, so unanimous in favor. Okay. All right, and that's the Varick Clarkson CitiBike station. Okay. And okay, so that's probably the fastest we ever decided on an issue. Okay. So
Lois, Lois
yes.
is raising her hand. You have a comment, Lois?
Unmute
No, I
yourself,
was
Lois.
raising my hand to say yes.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, so we got a
I didn't know
unanimous.
we were doing it like this.
Oh, okay. Well,
Oh, okay.
oh yeah,
Sorry.
right. Oh, you were gonna do a nice little symbol. Okay, I guess between the few of us here, we can just talk. Okay, so now we're up to Canal Street. And again, I'll just put my 2 cents in and say, you know, I think that all of us have observed the problems on Canal. So there's no doubt about how we feel, but are there specific kinds of pointers that any of you would like to make that we might integrate into a resolution? First of all, wait a minute, straw vote. Anybody against a study to improve conditions on Canal Street?
No.
No. Okay, fine. So the question then is, do we want to make very specific recommendations? And if so, I mean, some have been made already by Adrian. And I very strongly feel that and Carter gave some good suggestions. And I do feel that—
Now I'm raising my hand. It's Lois.
Okay, and I do feel that we need to get that information good and quick about, you know, the actual size of the lanes, of each lane, which ones are used for storage, at what times of day, and that kind of thing. So that maybe it can be fine-tuned a little. Okay, so we got Lois. Right.
And yeah, and the time frame that it would take, because construction, let's just say it goes through, that construction takes a very long time, and that will cause a lot of problems on Canal Street. So I was just curious if in the study they can predict how long this would take and when they would do the construction, what time periods they would do it, and to state who is doing a sign. We did this years ago, a sign of who does the construction and who to contact. Do you recall that, Shirley?
I recall the only times we start asking for that sort of thing is when construction's about to begin.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I don't, frankly, I don't think that's—
well, not who's doing it, but how long it's going to take, the time period, start and stop.
Sure that to a study with clear parameters, maybe?
Yes.
The parameters of starting and stopping, starting and completing.
Timeline.
Yeah, timeline.
Timeline, yes.
Yes, right. And anticipated construction time. How's that?
Janet has a comment.
Yes, I see that, Janet. That's you again, Janet, right? Because you've spoken. Yeah.
A lot of these things don't, one, and just as a sort of commentary, I think it's important for us, you know, it's horrible and morbid that people are getting seriously injured and killed on the street. So it would be sort of remiss to be overly concerned about level of service for cars when this level of service for human beings is so crappy. But anyway, so just it's sort of a commentary.
I don't think we have
I
to
just don't
address
think we
it.
want to get lost in the level of service for cars
No.
too much. But on the recommendations, you know, they were sort of easy to difficult. So when we write this, you know, maybe we think about that sort of in order. I mean, LPIs are simple. That's an adjustment on the walking clock. You know, studying loading zones to create more loading zones, no construction, that's some signage. And if there's a lot of double parking on the street, that could be addressed quickly.
Sure.
Bulb outs also not a capital improvement, very
The
simple.
painted ones, right?
Yeah, and they can significantly shorten crossing distances.
Right.
So maybe when we write this, you know, we write this sort of, you know, with the cognition that sort of simple, that there are, you know, that they're simple. And then if we want to start sort of going into more complicated ones, then those sort of move down the list a little.
Right. I just see that Darlene has said that there were some, there was a study with Hudson Square, and I do remember that the West Side was studied. And I think that Darlene, just to answer your chat, I would say that this would be, well, George is saying a comprehensive study, so that it would have to include the whole street and the impacts of the various parts of the streets on each other. So one of Darlene, just for your information, usually studies do take in previous studies. So that might be something actually that we should say with some attention to previous studies and findings. Anybody? Yeah. Okay. I don't hear that.
Basically, I think it would be helpful to the folks that are promoting congestion pricing if the community board, our community board, said we support that because we're a victim of the intense volume of traffic because we don't have congestion pricing. And I think just saying a few simple words like that would give a little muscle to the efforts to do something. And of course, the other thing is to make sure it is a comprehensive study. But I think it's important we raise our voice because we're victims of this.
Sure. I mean, I'm all for a mention of the sooner we can do congestion pricing, a lot of these things can be possibly simplified. So yeah, everybody agree on that? Yeah, congestion pricing.
Clarification,
Mention congestion
pricing charged on crossing through Canal Street, meaning what are the alternatives if this is through traffic? And you know, that's really the question, because it's so unique in that there's no way to go across down here. And so does anybody know how that's gonna work?
Well, they're figuring that some traffic, in most cities, they divert the traffic. It does, you know, traffic doesn't cut right through, it goes around. So the hope is that by equalizing, virtually you're equalizing sort of the tolls, that people will choose not to cross through Manhattan, that they might actually go through, you know, over the Verrazano Bridge in Staten Island, or maybe they'll take another route because it's no longer free. And they'll realize this is not an effective way to circumvent Manhattan. That's the intention.
The congestion pricing though starts what, at 61st Street? Is that it, George? 61st?
Something like that. All from there, all the river crossings, and it needs to be thought out in a way that's aimed toward reducing traffic in the core of the city. And we have to speak out that we would like to reduce the volume of traffic in the city. and that should be an important element of the plan. And that, putting it simply, one is that the pricing, you set the dial, there'll be fewer cars. And the dial can be set whatever the volume you want to turn down the traffic on. The other thing is that if you provide more attractive alternatives, in fact, use the money raised to significantly improve public transit, for instance, then you're having a carrot and stick together, more complicated than our elected officials can handle, particularly our governor. I haven't heard him say anything about that. But I think it's something we need to say 5 or 6 sentences and gets it all over with.
Okay.
But I just a little more clarification on this because it's not making sense, because the roundabout ways that you're suggesting on somebody who's transiting regionally are so far away, it's very different than somebody transiting a long distance. But somebody transiting in our region, going across the Verrazano Bridge and coming around is a really long way. And I just wonder if that's a point that actually is used against congestion pricing, because it's like it's sort of the problem of southern Manhattan, and it's driving all the other traffic further north.
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about, Carter. I would simply say that I think we have to really see what happens once congestion pricing is in operation, and I guess be optimistic that it needs to be factored in. I understand what George is saying. He's saying if we're going to get it, then we have to pressure for it, even if it's been approved already. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think that I myself am just simply saying there's no harm in asking, to.
Yeah, I think the point of congestion pricing was to discourage people from entering the core of Manhattan.
Right.
So
south of 64th Street, I think it was, right?
The people who are transiting through, their destination is not the core of Manhattan. So those are two different objectives, and that's why I just bring them up as two different things, because I think that it confuses the distraction of the core of Manhattan if you're taking people transiting, that's where you get pushback from people who live in Brooklyn,
I understand what you're saying. I'd like some comments from the committee on that.
Congestion pricing already passed. It got the votes. So it's done. It's just a matter of implementation.
Yeah, but what he's talking about is the specific Canal Street corridor, right, Carter?
Right, and and they've mentioned that on the West Side Highway, West Street, whether that's a part of this or not. I think those are all still open questions, right?
Yeah, so the question is whether we equate congestion pricing with congestion on Canal Street. How do people feel about that? I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Well, look, you know what? I can throw it in, then we can decide once I get the resolution around. And by the way, Janet, you and I are going to be working on the resolution together, right? We had talked about it before. Okay. So we can go back and forth and then get it to the committee. And anybody else? I think there were the obvious things that they were speaking about. They were speaking about certain curbside regulations, the possible narrowing of the travel lanes to possibly allow for sidewalk widening, neck downs, LPIs, trying to think what else. But I mean, all of those things, I presume everybody agrees with. So
it's a really good time to do a study because Canal Street's changing so much right now. Most of those properties have transacted. It's sort of waiting to be something else. And
is that true? Yeah, because you're down there a lot.
I used to live on Canal Street, and I can tell you from just going back, most of those buildings just in the last decade or a good chunk have really changed, or you can see they're readying for change. And
has there been a big turnover?
there, you can see the development a little bit more further west, but everybody is poised to do things, meaning, that underlying character of what Canal Street has been. I'm sure most of you remember, you went down there 10 years ago, it's totally different. And so it's a good time to just figure out what's going on so that appropriate planning can happen. Canal Street, having lived there for a couple of years, is so unique because every hour of the day is different, and it's craziness. And it's either crazy because it's empty, or crazy because nobody's moving, crazy because everybody's turning. It's gridlock in another hour. And all of that accounts for why it's so dangerous for pedestrians. And
Right.
And
Well, it's kind of like not predictable.
That's right. That's right. And so it really can catch you off guard if you're not really familiar with it. And that's why just smoothing it out where it's really just a cross street would really, a cross through would really calm all that crazy movement and turns and where people are hurt and injured, and figuring that out really make a big difference.
So a good time for a study. Changes in the air in a way. Okay. And Janet, I just saw your little comment in chat. Would you just share that comment? Because that kind of follows up on what Carter's saying, actually, right?
Yeah, Vornado, I mean, there is change happening. Vornado bought a few new properties. There's some residential buildings going up. I think there might be some hotels. I do know the retail has turned over. So it is on the cusp of parts of it becoming a different street.
Fascinating. Okay, anything else? Because, oh, Adam, yeah.
Thank you. I just, to Carter's point, I just looked at some Google Maps transit times to see what the detour would add to take a ring road around the city as opposed to cutting through. Generally from like a huge amount of Brooklyn to get to New Jersey, it's going to add like 10 minutes. And I think
10 minutes.
Yeah, and I think, the trade-off would be kind of the vitality and livability and safety of a street and a neighborhood, versus, being a transit corridor, which was already proposed, right? Isn't that the Lower Manhattan Expressway? I'm not sure I understand the difference between, the suggestion that the road serve through traffic and be sort of a rapid or express way for, cars to move across Lower Manhattan. I think that is Lomax, right? Which,
well, there's always been those conflicting opinions about any of those large crosstown streets.
It's no different than Midtown.
Right.
Where you can only turn, you can't cross can't cross a street. You can only turn south or north depending on which direction you're going. You can't cross the opposing traffic.
I'd like to ask something of all of you. Adam, you just said that the diversion of the traffic would be about 10 minutes.
I was just looking at like Crown Heights to New Jersey. I just was moving dots around.
Okay, I haven't driven in years. I don't even have a car. Some of you who do drive are aware more of driving. Is 10 minutes a lot to take out of your driving time? Is that really punishing?
If you try to cross Canal during rush hour, it probably takes you an hour or forever. So it's a really hard thing. Like if you're doing it right now, Adam, and checking that's because it's COVID, it's this hour, there's no traffic. So another time, if you put those coordinates in, it might actually be faster. So anyway, that's just,
yeah.
So the 10 minutes, that's in the best scenario. I think rarely do people who drive around Manhattan see the difference between 5 or 10 minutes.
Anybody else want to comment on it? I think it's an interesting. Traffic is, what did Darlene say there? She put a little something in her chat. Traffic is pretty normal on Canal. Normal, but we've been hearing just the opposite, right? Maybe it is at a certain time of day, right, Carl?
Yeah, I mean,
You know more about.
it's like, on a Friday afternoon, our neighborhood looks like it always looked on a Friday afternoon, but on a Tuesday afternoon, it's not the same. It's the through traffic really is very noticeable. And for us, at least that's what I've seen.
We have to keep in mind that traffic patterns are so significantly different right now because we just overall have a lower volume of traffic. So it's not going to reflect like it would, 12 months ago.
That's exactly right. And that's the same with
Quite true.
in New Jersey going through the interchange, what's the bridge, the Goethals Bridge? Is that the bridge? That whole section going up the Turnpike, if you're going to some other part of New Jersey, those are all crazy, have their own craziness, just from my experience over the years of moving around the area.
Right. Okay, well, you know what? It is 6:16? I guess it is. And there is a meeting coming in on Zoom, our Zoom at 6:30. So if none of you have anything else to say, Janet, should I take a first stab? And then we'll go back and forth. Okay. And then we'll get it to all of you for all your input. And I really would appreciate your input, including you, Carter. Of course, you live there. And thank you to our guests for your input.
I used to live there.
Used to live there, well, but you're still kind of around there, right? Whatever, anyhow. We will go back and forth and work on it. And thank you, guests, attendees for coming. Thank you, panelists, community board members, community committee members. Yeah, I'm saying this because I'm amazed we actually have time for me to say this. Ordinarily, I say, let's get the heck off. So yeah, let's get the heck off and give the SLA committee their chance. So see you soon at full board, if not sooner. And thanks to everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Janet.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good night.